Thursday, February 13th, 2025. I was in the midst of a busy week releasing rehabilitated manatees, leading a 120-student field trip, and working with an education foundation to review natural resources materials with students before their state testing. That night, I read an article stating that the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, had fired all of their probationary employees and was offering soft guidance to all federal agencies to do the same. Looking back, I was worried, but I felt that I'd probably be fine. All federal employees start with a 1 or 2 year probationary period and go through another one when they switch to supervisory roles. I was hired into a permanent position at a national wildlife refuge that wasn't fully staffed and had high visitation. Obviously, if they decide to fire, they'll have each agency look internally and make their own careful decisions, right? And a reduction in force, or a RIF, could take many months to execute, so I'll be fine, right?
Today is February 14th, 2026. For most, today is about Valentine's Day. But for those of us in the federal workforce, this date marks a darker anniversary. 1 year ago today, what was dubbed as the Valentine's Day Massacre unfolded. Across the country, thousands of federal probationary employees received a near-identical email. For those in the Park Service and other Department of the Interior agencies, it didn't matter if you were in the field, in an office, or at home with your family. It didn't matter if you had never had a performance review, or if your most recent review was exemplary. Without warning, and in a move that bypasses a century of civil service protections, the heart was ripped out of our public lands, alongside so many other critical government functions. The message was cold and systemic. Within the National Park Service, we were told, and I quote, "The department determined that you have failed to demonstrate fitness or qualifications for continued employment because your subject matter knowledge, skills, and abilities do not meet the department's current needs, and it is necessary and appropriate to terminate during the probationary period." Basically, they were telling us that we failed to perform our duties. It was a blanket justification used to purge dedicated public servants across the federal government. In the Department of the Interior and the National Park Service, scientists, interpretation rangers, maintenance workers, law enforcement, educators, and so many more were all fired under the guise of poor performance. Today, we look at the wreckage left behind, the legal battles that followed, and the resilience of a community that refuses to be silenced. This is Resistance Rangers on the Air, and I'm your host, Maya Soros, a fellow fired probationary employee. Co-hosting with me today is Loaf. Today, you will hear from a variety of people from the National Park Service and across the federal government whose lives changed from these firings.
The February 13th story you heard at the beginning of this episode was from a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee, an agency that, like the National Park Service, is a part of the Department of the Interior. Before we get into more stories from some of those fired, here's some context for our non-Fed listeners. In the federal government, new permanent employees go through a probationary period, usually 1 year, when they start their job. When you hear probationary, you might assume probationary employees are in trouble or have done something wrong, but that's not true. Federal workers in general have something called civil service protections. These are job protections that make sure that people who work for the federal government are able to do their jobs without being blown around by political winds. It doesn't mean that they can't be fired, but it means that there are processes in place to make sure that they aren't, say, fired en masse for political reasons. A probationary period is essentially a trial period, where if someone turns out to be a horrible employee who can't do their job, they can be let go without as much hullabaloo. It's a normal part of the process, and most federal employees in the past would pass their probationary periods without a fuss. And probationary employees still have some protections. They aren't supposed to be able to be fired without cause. But the current administration ignored that. On January 20th, 2025, through a memo from the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, the new administration asked agencies to submit lists of their probationary employees to OPM. This, of course, got a lot of people nervous, as the new administration had promised to drastically shrink the size of the federal government. On January 28th, all federal employees got an email offering a fork in the road, saying that they could resign now and get paid for several more months. The implication that many of us got from this email? Quit now, take this offer, or we'll fire you. On February 11th, President Trump signed an order titled Implementing the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, Workforce Optimization Initiative, that directed agencies to drastically reduce their workforces. On February 13th, after the fork in the road window closed, news started to fly of the Office of Personnel Management telling agencies that they should fire their probationary employees. OPM fired their own probationary employees, and other agencies started to follow. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, hundreds of National Park Service employees joined the thousands of other federal workers who were fired. There was no input from their supervisors or from the superintendents of their parks, just a letter firing them. In early March, OPM edited their own January 20th memo to claim that it was, quote, not directing agencies to take any specific performance-based actions regarding probationary employees. Agencies, it said, have ultimate decision-making authority over and responsibility for such personnel actions. But the damage had been done. OPM had all but forced agencies to fire their probationary employees, and agencies, including the National Park Service, had done it. While a long legal battle meant many probationary employees were later offered reinstatement, this was a huge blow to the federal government and to the lives of every single person affected. We'll hear from some of them now. Some of these stories have been edited for length and clarity.
Imagine sitting at your desk, watching the clock slowly tick from the start of the day until you clock out of work at 5. You're paralyzed, waiting for an email that might end your career. When the clock finally hits 5 and the inbox is empty, you exhale. You think you survived. But for me and so many of my fellow coworkers, the nightmare didn't end at the office. It was only just beginning. This job wasn't just a paycheck for me. It was a dream job. It was the start of my dream career. It was everything I had worked towards. I am the granddaughter of a sharecropper, a man who had to drop out of school in the 3rd grade to work the fields. He never learned to read, and even my mother never got a high school diploma. She dropped out at 17 to raise 2 children on her own. I was the first to go to college, the first to get a master's degree, the first to leave my small town to chase something bigger. When I finally put on that National Park Service uniform, it felt like I had reached the summit for all of us. I finally had my foot in the door of my dream career. I had achieved the American dream. But that dream ended. The day it ended started with me waking up to news of firings in the Forest Service. I began the day with a pit in my stomach as I prayed all day that the Park Service would be spared. By noon that day, the rumors were swirling and there were whispers of a list. a list with all the names of who would be fired. I asked my supervisor about that very list, but she told me she didn't know anything, so I waited. I watched the time slowly crawl all day, constantly checking my email until 5 o'clock hit. It was only then, when I logged off, that I felt this massive wave of relief. I'm safe, or so I thought. I went to dinner with my family after that, and around 5:40, my daughter was playing with my phone when a notification popped up. I sat there in a loud, crowded restaurant, reading my termination letter, which told me that I had been terminated because the department no longer felt the need for my position, because I was basically a poor performer. I read this as my 1-year-old was crying for me to play with her. In that moment, I felt angry. I felt confused. And I felt hurt. But I couldn't do anything about those feelings because I had to be a mom and I had to put on a face until my husband and I could get home. That night and the following weeks, I went through a range of feelings. And a year later, I still feel bitter and raw about what happened. My life is different than how I planned. People talk about moving on, but I'm still struggling with an identity crisis. For the first time in my life, I don't know where I want to go in my career. It's hard to dream or have goals when I feel like they could be ripped from me again at any moment. I feel bitter. When I realize the ladder I was climbing has been pulled out from me, I feel robbed. And sometimes when I catch a glimpse of my old National Park hat sitting on the shelf, my heart breaks again, and I feel like my dream was taken from me. People talk about moving on, but I can't move on. Not when the ladder I was climbing, the one my grandfather and my mother started building for me, was pulled out from under my feet. I used to believe in the American dream, but standing here now, I feel like that dream no longer exists. I did everything right, and I was still robbed. My dream wasn't just lost, it was taken.
I lost my job in the Park Service about a year ago now, and it's super weird to think about how it's been that long because it feels like it was yesterday. It feels like it's something I'm still living through, and it also feels like kind of like it was a lifetime ago because so much has happened since then. I started my career in the Park Service as a seasonal worker in the New England area in 2021. Before that, my background was in history and museums kind of work, so I kind of had known about the Park Service, had some of my family members work either for the Park Service or concessions or Forest Service or things like that. So it was a career I knew about, and so I started doing seasonal work in 2021, decided I really liked it, and I worked at a few different National Historic Sites around the New England area, and I also went back to school. I did some continuing education related to advancing my Park Service career. And then I finally had my big break. In the summer of 2024, I was offered a permanent job at Edison National Historical Park, which is a very small national historical site. I moved away from my friends, my family, my partner. I got a new apartment, I got a studio I could barely afford in New Jersey to go and work at Edison for this position that was a GS5 and paid like $42K a year. And I was like still waiting tables at night. And it was a furlough position, so I was off January and February and supposed to go back, I guess, end of February, beginning of March. And I was fine with that because permanent positions are so competitive in the Park Service. I was like, this is my break. This is my foot in the door. It'll just go uphill from here. So I really enjoyed my less than 6 months working at Edison. I was learning a lot. I was making friends. I was doing a lot of work for the Park Service. I was doing education programs, public interp programs, fees, media, all different sorts of things. And then I went on furlough in January. I did some travel, came back in February, visited my family, started driving back down on Valentine's Day to New Jersey so I could make it for one of my evening waitressing shifts. While I was in the car on the way there, my supervisor called me and very sort of awkwardly and regretfully told me that I was a victim of the Doge riff and there was nothing really he could do about it. And I kind of knew that was coming at that point. And it was a super weird feeling because I had to go to my serving shift and like work that night, so I couldn't really process it. I just was like, this is a fact I have to accept, and I have to kind of process it tomorrow.
A year later, among the fired probationary employees we talked to for this episode, the most common feeling toward their NPS careers at this point is uncertainty and insecurity. The second most is anger.
I think the thing that people who weren't fired understand the least is that the feeling of people not caring to help us, even though people said that they felt bad for us. I was fired for poor performance. It feels terrible. Of course we were not underperforming, but I have an SF50 that says that. And even a year later, it burns as bad as it did a year ago. Also, I still haven't been made whole thanks to HR ignoring my pleas. All of this feels like it's never ending.
My personal experience has been incredibly difficult. The world around me feels chaotic. My work environment is toxic from my perspective. I am actively seeking a new job with a better pay so I'm not trapped living paycheck to paycheck, juggling multiple jobs. I refuse to remain stuck, feeling passionless and lifeless. I am making every effort, but the outlook for the rest of the year appears bleak, empty, and hopeless.
After reinstatement, I received a job offer at a state park. I wanted to take it, but I was fearful that I'd have to pay back my recruitment incentive, PCS, which I couldn't afford. I've become more reckless and impatient since I've returned to work. Even small bureaucratic inefficiencies and inconveniences infuriate me, not to mention the larger actions that are taking place that are a threat to my integrity. The censorship of signs and books force performance ratings. It's been hard for my partner, who also works for the park and on my team, since it's evident that I have zero respect for leadership and for the agency's decisions. I've made it clear that I'm spiteful. I'm willing to lose my job again, and I don't mind disobeying directions I fundamentally disagree with.
Some fired probationary employees, or probies as we may refer to them in this episode, made the difficult decision to move on. For many of them, it seemed like the only option. 15% of the fired probies we talked to for this episode did not accept reinstatement. For those who did, almost a third of them have since left their NPS jobs.
It felt very much like a broken heart when I was fired. I was really torn. I had spent years of my life chasing down the stream, and to finally have it come through, it felt really hard to walk away from. I was worried that that was my one and only ticket in, and if I left, the odds of lightning striking again were not good, and that my dream would be forever done if I walked away then. But it was impossible to know what was going to happen. I didn't know whether to move on or to hold out hope. Reinstatement was a distinct possibility because everyone knew just how unlawful the firing was, But people didn't know if that would come in 9 days or 9 months or maybe even longer. And as the sole provider for my family, I didn't have time to wait to find out. So I immediately began applying to other jobs. But every interview I had inevitably turned to whether or not I would go back to the National Park Service if I was reinstated. I was fully ready to leave my dream job because I knew I had to be smart and make the rational decision given all the headlines about a recession coming. But the limbo state that we were in made me unhireable. It didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter that I was genuinely ready to walk away for good for another job. People were going to believe what they were going to believe because they knew how unfair and unplanned my exit had been. So the administration had taken my job and then at the same time made me completely unhireable by any other employer. And even if I was reinstated and brought back on, there were talks and threats of more and more layoffs. And so even if we were all able to get back in, it might not be for long. And at that point, everyone who had already jumped ship would have found the few jobs left in our market. People were leaving the federal government in droves, and what was a competitive market became just even worse. It was a horrible situation to game out, and I definitely felt like I would lose either way. I think that here we are a year later. It's easy for people to forget just how scary those first few months were. I would say the world's scary again, but in a different way. Then it was very much shock and awe with the administration. We were seeing our government being dismantled and a billionaire or world's richest man put in charge of our government. Tariffs were being put in place, and every other headline was about a recession coming. It was a very scary time to have no kind of stability or predictability.
When I accepted my position with the National Park Service in summer 2024, I was ecstatic. It was a dream job on so many levels. I got to use my specialized skills to contribute to a mission that I fully supported and spend time in parks all over the country. I was paid fairly, got health insurance for my family, and I knew I didn't have to worry about emotional burnout from working long hours in a job I didn't love. When I was fired on Valentine's Day 2025, I was scared. I immediately started applying for jobs and had multiple offers by the time the reinstatement was offered in March. Faced with a likely future reduction in force, I made the choice that seemed more stable for my family and declined reinstatement. Now in the private sector, I'm getting paid more in the same field, but the stress level is high and job demands mean less time with my family and a deteriorated quality of life. I deeply miss the NPS mission and my role in it. I am angry and mourning the future I had imagined for myself with the Park Service. I know I would be much more resilient personally if it weren't for the stream of chaos and evil this administration continues to unleash on our country and the world. My loss is tiny by comparison. When I see the magnitude of what others are losing, it is difficult to hope that the future will be better.
Well, I was unhappy. I moped for a couple weeks, wear the same clothes every day, etc. Beginning of March, started working to break my lease at the end of that month and started moving out of that apartment and back to my family, who I didn't ideally want to be living with, but it was sort of the option I had at that point as I sort of got my feet under me and figured out what I would do next. And at the end of that month, when I had pretty much all the way moved out and broken the lease and signed all the paperwork and things like that, is when a court case reinstated us. My boss very, very nicely called me and asked if I want to come back, and I explained that I had already moved, and that was weird, and he very regretfully told me I had to officially resign, and that felt really weird because it didn't feel like resigning, it felt like being forced out. And I think that's part of it too. It's like a big part of Doge and these other sort of attempts to make very big and broad changes at the government agencies. It's almost like a sieve. Like, they know that even if courts reinstate what they do or something like that, they'll have lost enough people in the process. So I know I'm not the only person who had to move on with their life and do other things and couldn't take reinstatement.
And for many of those who returned, things have been difficult.
When I was abruptly fired last February, I remember my supervisor and division chief both sincerely saying, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Yet when I accepted reinstatement and came back, not a single person in park leadership acknowledged their role in passing along the illegal orders. When I was onboarding for the second time in 4 months, someone even said to me, "It'll be like it never happened," which seems to encapsulate NPS's attitude in general. But it's a feeling I will never be able to have. Less than a month after I returned, probationary workers at other agencies were refired after the Supreme Court decision and RIF threats began. For 8 long months, I bounced around between short-term apartment rentals, assuming that soon I would get refired or riffed. I didn't take or plan any vacations, thinking I needed to save money and that once I got fired, I'd have plenty of time off. On top of these threats, in July, the budget bill rescinded the IRA funding for my position. I was told my park could fund me through the fiscal year, but at that time, they couldn't guarantee anything more than that. Then the administration put additional roadblocks for renewing term employees and passing probation. I joked to my coworkers that as an IRA-funded term probationary employee working in climate change, there isn't enough room for all the targets on my back. But I also pointedly refused to do any project planning past my probationary and term renewal dates until I had explicit communication in writing that I'd be able to stay on. A year after being illegally fired, I still find myself avoiding saying it. I use euphemisms like my 6-week hiatus or my sabbatical, in part to avoid the inevitable awkwardness that comes when I do directly state I was illegally fired, and also because the truth is, while illegal firing is more honest and real, there are really no words that can fully do justice to the harm that the NPS and the Trump administration did on Valentine's Day last year.
I had been hired into my job and moved 2 states away in January of 2025 before being fired illegally 2 weeks later. The government paid $10,000 to move me out here, which was one of the most obvious examples that this was not premeditated by my park and also extremely inefficient. I operated for months from a place of self-preservation and almost manic productivity to feel useful and like I was bouncing back. I found a remote job in late February. Once I was reinstated with the NPS, I worked both jobs through mid-June. This was also when I became involved with RR and spent a lot of time in meetings and helping with projects, as well as getting involved in union organizing. April through mid-June, I worked 60 hours per week of work, plus whatever I could do to help my newfound community. I've been experiencing delayed burnout since the fall. It all caught up to me in December. I'm still in my job, but I've had to really limit what I do outside of work just to feel rested and mentally stable.
But despite it all, some who left still have hope that it's not the end of their NPS careers.
Accepting a job at the NPS was a big leap for me. I was coming from a purely academic background and making a major career change. I've always loved the NPS, and the idea of the job thrilled me, so I went for it. The reputation of permanent federal positions being long-term and stable was also very attractive. Having that job taken away from me a few months after starting was a heavy blow to my mental health, making me question all of my decisions and worry deeply about the damage this had done to my career. Even though I loved the job and the team I worked with and the place I lived, my trust in federal employment evaporated. After accepting reinstatement, the continued roller coaster of uncertainty only made things worse, so I began looking for ways out. Eventually, I got lucky enough to find a good option. I would love to come back to the NPS eventually. Even the short stint I had there gave me a deep appreciation for the work the NPS does and the people who dedicate their time and energy to the mission. But for me, it just ended up being a right place at the wrong time situation.
I still hope to return to NPS someday. Since being illegally terminated, I've joined the Northwest Regional Board of the NPCA, lobbied Congress, and have spoken to dozens of publications about my experiences and the importance of our national parks. I also continue to volunteer in parks. I've had multiple jobs since leaving, all trying to continue to gain relevant experience towards my actual career goal of eventually becoming an NPS superintendent. Someday I'll be in the green and gray again, hopefully someday soon. In the meanwhile, I'll try to do what's best for me and my parks.
I've been working for the Park Service since 2019, and I worked for state parks for numerous years before that. And I was in my first permanent job when I was illegally fired in February of 2025. I had started the job in December of 2024, and I had packed up my life from the house I had lived in off and on for years, and I moved multiple states away to settle at a park that was not new to me because I had worked there seasonally, but the job I was going into was new, and I was luckily able to start it remotely, and by the time I was settled in the park, I worked a total of 2 weeks before I was illegally fired by the Park Service, the Department of the Interior, or the Office of Personnel Management, depending on how you look at it, or all three. I think afterwards, I witnessed a lot of people react very differently to the shock and the grief, and personally, I was just really angry, and the anger fueled my problem-solving reaction to come out. And I basically went into action mode almost immediately and to problem-solving mode. And I had to figure out how to keep housing. I had to figure out how to get paid. I had to figure out how to contest this illegal firing at a Merit Systems Protection Board that Trump had already pretty much dismantled. I had to figure out what it even means to be part of a class action lawsuit. I read about federal labor law. I read about unions, and there was so much rapid just change and taking in of information and making very quick decisions between February and April, or really February and March of 2025. And in some ways, I feel lucky that my reaction was taking action fueled by anger. But the downside of that is that a number of months later, I started to crash. And I would say mid-summer to late summer, I started to feel burnt out. I had been reinstated into my job in the end of March, but I had already picked up a full-time remote job. So between the months of March and mid-June, I was working 2 jobs, and I was trying to help get some union organizing started at my park, and I had become involved with Resistance Rangers, which was really empowering and inspiring to be meeting a group of such smart, motivated, and driven people. However, doing all of that for numerous months really made me crash and burn, and I'm still feeling the effects of that burnout in February of 2026. And so looking ahead, what I hope for this next year is that myself and my colleagues can see a clearer path forward for our individual careers, but also the Park Service as a whole, and that we can learn to maybe find some peace in knowing that we support the Park Service's mission, but maybe we can't support this current administration, and we can't necessarily support everyone in leadership at the Park Service for their roles in letting colleagues be fired and letting censorship happen and letting performance evaluations be illegally altered by the Department of the Interior. And so that's my hope for us, is that we find some more clarity, we feel more grounded in our values, and we continue to find the motivation to push forward for a better agency and also for better individual lives at work and better careers.
I was so excited to get my job at the National Park Service and hoped to stay in my role for a decade. But the heartbreak I experienced on Valentine's Day was truly devastating. One thing I've gotten from this experience is the unwavering support from the Resistance Rangers community, who helped me feel less alone and helped me know that what I felt and experienced was not unique. Without this community, I wouldn't have made it through the past year. At times, my friends and family made me feel like I was being dramatic or emotional over losing my job. But the fellow NPS fired probies understood. We didn't just lose a job. We lost so much more than that. For those of you navigating loss and hardship due to this administration, find your community. You will need them. They will need you. We all need each other to get through this.
And remember, it's not just NPS employees who went through this. The community of federal employees is broader than just the Department of the Interior and the NPS, and includes thousands of people who've gone through the same thing.
Our tale begins in early 2024, when my wife and I, expecting our first child, moved cross-country, California to D.C., for my new job as a historic preservation specialist at the General Services Administration. Now, I know what you might be thinking. GSA sounds like a pretty pro forma government agency, my dude. Acquisitions, leases, contracts, boring. But in my field, it's actually one of the coolest places to work because they manage an enormous portfolio of historic buildings. I'd coveted a job there for a decade. It felt like being called up to the big leagues, and I intended to stay for many years. But just 11 months and 3 weeks later, shortly after the new administration took power, I was abruptly fired in the waning days of my probationary period, and without cause. The only justification I got was, it was no longer in the government's best interest to retain my employment. Why? I'll never know. I'm sure most of us can remember exactly where we were when those bloody Valentine's Day emails hit our inboxes. And for my family, well, it felt like it came at the worst possible time. 2 months earlier, we'd bought our first home. Our son, not yet 6 months old. The fear, grief, regret, it was all overwhelming. We felt like we might lose everything. The next week, trudging into the office to turn in my equipment, instead of my usual professional attire, I wore a Dead Kennedys t-shirt, holiday in Cambodia. It felt appropriate. I remember being so unbelievably pissed off. After I turned in my badge, a teammate and mentor escorted me out of the building. As we parted, she said, "You've got to let go of the anger. It wouldn't be good for the baby, and this wasn't going to be a nice place to work anymore anyway." Of course she was right, because a few weeks later, the rest of that team was also forced into administrative leave as well. Doge was wrapping its tendrils around the organization. Watching my team just dismantled overnight, that's when I finally broke down into tears. Because what was lost wasn't just collateral damage or a few soulless bureaucrats. It was decades of institutional knowledge and stewardship of historic places that belong to every American. At that moment, like so many of us, I had a choice.
I could shut down or I could speak out, and I chose the latter, speaking to journalists, with folks on Capitol Hill, and to basically anyone who would listen about what this senseless purge meant for us and for the country. Around that same time, the probationary firings were actually overturned in court, so I was technically rehired, placed on admin leave, and summarily notified I'd be fired again. While I was glad to be briefly back on the payroll, the whiplash of not knowing my status from one moment to the next was surreal and exhausting. The RIF notice came with an ultimatum. This time, we'd either be fired in June, or we could take the fork in the road option, formally resigning, to be paid for a few months beyond that. Worried about our mortgage and health care, I finally decided to accept the deal. It felt like the only viable choice, but it also felt like giving up. It was one of the most painful decisions of my life. While I was laid off, I tried to focus on moving forward, writing, taking classes, applying for jobs, staying connected to the preservation community through advocacy. Finally, late in the summer, a light appeared at the end of the tunnel. I applied, interviewed, and was hired as the architectural historian for DC's Public Transit Authority, known to locals simply as Metro, helping steward the iconic architecture of a system millions rely on. It's been about 5 months now, and I'm happy to report, I'm just so darn proud of how far we've come. I feel renewed and so relieved. When folks ask me how I'm feeling today about it all, my stock answer is basically, this is the next best thing. And what I mean by that is this is the next, best. The punctuation matters there. It's not a consolation prize or something I settled for. In many ways, it might be better. This past year truly revealed how resilient public servants can be through crisis. That we were always so much more than a job title, and certainly than the baseless pejoratives politicians sling around to slander us. Believe it or not, today I mostly feel gratitude. Not for the unnecessary chaos and pain created by the utter foolishness and abject cruelty of those in power. No, of course not. But gratitude for the meaningful path I was able to forge through the rubble. I'm grateful for the colleagues who shared that painful moment with me, and for the new connections I made along the way, some of whom I'm continuing to work with on an important advocacy campaign that connects back to the work I used to do at GSA. It allows me an outlet for that work, even as my professional life has moved in another direction. More importantly, I'm endlessly grateful for my family, my strong, supportive wife, and our beautiful little boy. They carried me through the darkest, hardest moments and reminded me what I was fighting for every step of the way.
After some 24,000 federal probationary employees were illegally and traumatically fired last February, these fired employees had to puzzle through a roller coaster of confusing court decisions that brought back probationary workers, then allowed them to get fired again, all without ruling on the actual legality of the firings. So now, almost a year later, what is the status of the cases? To briefly recap, about a month after the illegal firings, a U.S. District Court judge ruled that the mass probationary employee firings by the government likely broke the law and ordered reinstatement while the case was under consideration. But in April, the Supreme Court overturned the stay, allowing agencies to re-fire probationary employees. However, it did not decide whether the firings were lawful or not. While the NPS and other Department of the Interior agencies offered employees reinstatement and stuck with it, some agencies re-fired their probationary employees. For some agencies, this is still playing out. The EPA kept many fired probationary employees on administrative leave and only offered them actual reinstatement in December. In January, NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, finally offered its twice-fired probationary employees back pay and a chance to come back to work. All agencies were required to clear the probees' records of the paper-thin lies used to justify the firing, that it was due to performance, or that the employee failed to demonstrate that they met the agency's goals and priorities. This is important because without agency action, those lies would be on an employee's permanent record and follow them to every new job they applied for. After dragging their feet and failing to meet the court deadline to send a simple letter to fired probationary employees stating that their firing was not due to performance, DOI and other agencies finally sent a form letter with a whiny tone of a petulant teenager stating that they believed their appeal would prevail, but in the meantime, here's your letter, not because it's the right thing to do, but because we were told to do so. Because that letter didn't conform with the court's order, DOI was forced to send a second letter clarifying that probationary employees were not fired for cause, which it finally did in November, months after they were originally ordered to do so. Recently, OPM released data that states that of the original 24,000 illegally fired probationary employees, only 6,000 were actually fired by the end of the year. Even a single probationary employee illegally fired is one too many, but James and Hoffman, a law firm representing probationary employees in a class action lawsuit that is still awaiting Merit Systems Protection Board consideration, speculate in a recent blog post that most agencies declined to refire their reinstated probationary employees because it was such shaky legal ground. Their self-serving but hopeful takeaway from the probationary legal battle is that sometimes even short-lived court orders can significantly undermine hasty policies. So the case over the illegal probationary employee firings continues, and it will likely drag on for a long time, though it will never outlive the trauma and life-altering impacts that strongly affect many of these employees to this day.
A couple things I would like people to know. One is that all of these cuts and changes to the Park Service aren't saving money. In many cases, they're costing a lot more money. Things like, for instance, short staffing can lead to delayed maintenance and decay of things that cost a lot more money to repair in the long run. The other thing I'd like people to know is that the Park Service, at least up till now, has had a really exceptional staff. People who are really unique, educated, skilled people who are motivated and join out of personal passion, and often have a really wide and niche set of knowledge and skills that they bring to their job. And when we lose these people, we lose a lot. And a lot of Park Service employees are not people you can just easily replace by hiring another person. They have such unique abilities and skill sets. So we have a huge amount that we stand to lose.
I achieved the American dream. My family did, to be precise. I went to church, I got good grades, I went to college out of state, I took a job out with the Corps, was promised sun, was promised more, was promised steps to reach the top. It came, it went, now I've spent my time, my energy. Now here I sit under this tree, off amber waves towards majesty, those spacious skies I've grown to love, thought this was it, made this place home. And here's the kick. Moved all my shit for them to fuck the forkin' road.
As we close this anniversary episode, I find myself thinking about the different directions our lives have pulled each of us over the last year. Since the legal battles and the reinstatement offers began, we have all taken different paths. This isn't just a story of the National Park Service. It is a story shared by dedicated public servants across the federal government. Many of us chose to return upon reinstatement. We went back to the desk, the laboratories, and the trailheads we love to be able to continue the work from the inside, despite the scars of last February. Others, like myself, had to leave. For some, the financial toll of the displacement was too great. For others, the trust was too broken to repair. And many found new ways to serve. Whether you are back in your position or standing on new ground, you are still the backbone of this country's mission. Whether you are a biologist in the Fish and Wildlife Service, a historian with the General Services Administration, or an administrator keeping the wheels of democracy turning, your value remains. For those of us in the Department of the Interior and the National Park Service, the weight of the uniform is heavy, but it was never what made us who we are. Whether you are back in the field or forged in a new career, we are all still and always will be Rangers at heart. The commitment to the resources, the respect for the stories we carry, and the dedication to the public, it didn't just disappear when we took our uniforms off. To every fired federal worker listening, especially my fellow National Park Service and Department of Interior colleagues, know that you are not alone. Resistance Rangers is fighting for all of us and the lands and legacies we so passionately protect. We are fighting for those who went back to change the system from within, those who moved on to new places, and those who are still looking for their way home. We are the memory and the future of the federal service, and we are not going anywhere.
Good evening, y'all. Welcome back to your safe place, Camp Smoky. I hope you're well, and I invite you to take a seat right beside me. I want to first wish everyone who supports us in our fight for public lands a prosperous and kind new year. However, tonight is about a group that has great significance to us at Camp Smoky, and that's our probationary rangers, who 1 year ago were unjustifiably removed from their positions in a harmful and cruel fell swoop, the impacts of which are still affecting them to this day. So this is for y'all. Let's get one thing straight here. You are not at fault. You did nothing wrong, and your feelings are valid. You are and forever will be a ranger, a coworker, a friend, and a camper at Camp Smoky. We tip our hat to you, and we thank you for your service, your passion, your commitment, your blood, your sweat, and your tears. To those who have left the service, we do not blame you. We honor you. And for those who continue to fight with us, no matter their tactics, we stand by you, shoulder to shoulder. We will not give up. We will not forget. We will never surrender to this regime. We will keep fighting till there is no longer a need. So this goes out to anyone who needs to hear this right now. Be safe. Find your people. Take care of yourself. And ranger on. This is Counselor C. Pratt, signing off.
Thank you for listening to Resistance Rangers on the Air. We collect breaking news and stories from the front lines of the resistance, fact check and filter everything through the lens of our experiences with public lands. You may not know that there are laws, rules, and traditions that have long prevented rangers and other civil servants from speaking out. Through our collective anonymity, we speak for those who can't. For more info, check out our website and socials linked in the show notes. Leave no trace and ranger on.